Hi, my name's Mat Creedon and welcome to Music is Medicine. A child once asked me a question during a music lesson that I thought I knew the answer to. We were both sitting at the piano and I'd been showing a few different scales, and eventually we arrived at C major. I said, almost without thinking, this is a good one to start with. C major is one of the easiest keys to learn. And the child looked at the piano and then looked at me and asked, why? Well, because it doesn't have any sharps or flats. They looked back at the piano and I could see them thinking. Then they asked, what's wrong with the black ones? I laughed, nothing. So why are they harder? I opened my mouth to answer and then stopped, because that's the wonderful thing about teaching children. Every now and then they'll ask a perfectly reasonable question that exposes a completely unreasonable thing you've believed for 30 years. I looked at the keyboard again. C major, it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B. No sharps, no flats, just white notes, nice and easy. Then I thought about C sharp major, 7 sharps. The key looks like someone spilled a box of hashtags all over the page. Surely that's harder, but then I stopped looking at the letters and instead I looked at the relationships. It's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Same as C major. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Which is the same as C sharp major. Exactly the same. The child was still waiting for an answer, and so I said, actually, maybe it isn't harder. They shrugged. That's what I thought, and started playing again. I sat there thinking, hang on, who's teaching who here? So I tried something. I played a simple little melody in C major, nothing complicated, just a handful of notes. Then I moved the whole thing into another key, different notes, different place on the piano, same relationships. I asked the child, does that sound like the same tune? Yep, but I changed all the notes. They looked at me as though I'd been deliberately silly. No, you didn't. I laughed. Yes, I did. No, you just moved it. And there it was again. You just moved it. I had spent years thinking of keys as separate collections of notes. The child heard the relationship. The melody hadn't changed. Its address had. And that got me thinking. Imagine every musical key is a different language. C major is English, D major is French, E major is Mandarin, and G major might be German. Different words, different sounds, but each language can express the same ideas. Every language has some way of saying hello. Every language has some way of saying goodbye. Every language can express happiness, sadness, fear, excitement, and love. The words are different, the meaning underneath them isn't. Music works in much the same way. Every major key has a 1. Every key has somewhere that feels like home. Every key has tension. Every key has resolution. The labels change. The relationships remain. That's really what I've been trying to explore through the easy key. It's not about replacing the alphabet. It's not about saying C, D, E, F, G don't matter. They do. It's about discovering another way of listening. Instead of asking only what note is that, we can also ask what relationship am I hearing? One tells us the name, the other begins to tell us what the note is doing. And children seem to understand this remarkably quickly because they haven't necessarily learned all the rules yet. Sometimes they'll play something that technically isn't what I was expecting. Maybe they'll land on a flattened second. It's tense, uncomfortable, a sound that seems to want to go somewhere else. And I might say, that's an interesting note. And the child might say, yeah, I like it. What do you like about it? It sounds spooky. Fair enough, spooky is good. So we play it again and we put a chord underneath it. Suddenly that strange note has character. Maybe it sounds mysterious. Maybe it sounds Middle Eastern. Maybe it sounds like something from a film. The note that could have been labelled wrong suddenly becomes the most interesting note in the room, and it makes me wonder how often we do exactly the opposite in our lives. Something feels uncomfortable, so we call it bad. Something feels unfamiliar, so we call it difficult. Someone is different from us, so we keep our distance. We compare everything with what we think it should be. And then we judge it according to the comparison. Children haven't always learned to do that yet. They hear a strange sound and think, that's interesting. Adults hear a strange sound and sometimes think, that's wrong. There's a big difference between the two. The child keeps playing. Eventually, they make a mistake. Oops! And they play it again. Another mistake. Oops! Again. Eventually, they get it and we continue. But I've watched adults do exactly the same thing. They make a mistake, stop, shake their head and say, I'm hopeless. Think about what just happened. The child said, I played the wrong note. The adult said, there's something wrong with me. That's an extraordinary leap. Somewhere along the way, we've taken an experience and turned it into an identity. We don't say, I'm feeling discouraged today. We say, I am discouraged. We don't say, I'm finding this difficult. We say, I'm not musical. We don't say, I haven't learned how to do this yet. We say, I can't do it. We've taken one note and decided it's the whole song. Imagine if a minor third did that. I'm sadness. No, you're not. You're a minor third. In one context, you might sound sad. In another, you might sound beautiful. In another, you might sound bluesy. In another, you might sound powerful. Your meaning comes partly from your relationship to everything around you. A single note doesn't tell us the whole story. Neither does a single moment in our lives. And perhaps that's one of the things children quietly remind us. Make the mistake. Notice it. Learn from it. Then keep playing. No identity crisis required. But there's another thing I've noticed. Eventually, even children start wanting to get to the end. How much more is there? Are we nearly finished? Is this the last bit? Suddenly the music has changed. Not the actual music, the experience of it. Now we're trying to arrive somewhere. And whenever I notice that happening, I think about floating in a swimming pool. Imagine you're lying on an inflatable mattress, the sun is warm, the water is gently rocking you back and forwards. You're completely supported. For a few minutes, there's absolutely nowhere you need to be. You're just floating. Then suddenly you decide, I need to get to the other side of the pool. Immediately everything changes. The sun hasn't changed. The water hasn't changed, the inflatable hasn't changed, but you're no longer experiencing any of those things. You're now trying to arrive. That's what we do with music. We try to reach the end of the song. We try to finish the scale. We try to get through the difficult passage. We try to become a better musician. And sometimes we become so obsessed with the next note that we stop hearing this one. So I tell the child the swimming pool story. They think about it for a moment. Then they say, so just float? I smile. Yeah, just float. So we go back to the music. This time there's nowhere to get to. We play one note, listen, then another. Maybe I put a chord underneath. The child chooses another note, then another. Some sound beautiful, some sound strange, some create tension, and some resolve. And then eventually something wonderful happens. We stop talking altogether. We're just playing. I'm listening to them. They're listening to me. Neither of us knows exactly what's coming next. And that's okay. One person plays something, the other responds. A little musical conversation begins. No sheet music, no right answer, no destination, just listening. After a little while we stop. The room becomes quiet again. The child looks at me and says, was that a song? I think about it. I suppose it was. What was it called? I don't know. They smile. Can we play it again? And there it is. No recording, no audience, no certificate, no achievement. We hadn't even given the thing a name, and yet the child wanted to play it again, simply because playing it had felt good. I suddenly thought about all the years I'd spent watching students chase the end of songs. All the adults who had told me they weren't musical, all the people who thought they were too old, too slow, too untalented, all those rules we'd somehow collected along the way. And sitting beside me was a child who hadn't learned all of them yet. Maybe that's why I enjoy teaching children so much. We think we're teaching them how to become musicians, but sometimes, if we're paying attention, they're reminding us what we're like before someone told us what a musician was supposed to be. The child hadn't confused the map with the landscape. They hadn't confused a wrong note with being wrong. They hadn't decided that unfamiliar meant difficult. They hadn't asked whether music was good enough to share. They simply listened, played, made mistakes, laughed and kept going. I looked down at the keyboard. Black notes, white notes, sharps, flats, letters, numbers. All the different systems were invented to explain this extraordinary thing we call music. Useful maps, wonderful maps, but still maps. A child put one finger on a key. Can I play any note? I smiled, yep. They played one, even that one, especially that one. Another one, then another. I began playing a bass riff, and off we went. No destination, no right answer, just listening. Maybe that's what music has been trying to teach me all these years. Sometimes you don't need to reach the other side of the pool. Sometimes you can just float. I'm Mat Creedon, and this has been Music is Medicine. Until next time, keep listening.